Okay, if you're a Judas Priest fan, I think you will really enjoy what I have for you here today. Anybody that follows this channel knows that I absolutely love Judas Priest. And my first introduction to Judas Priest was Screaming for Vengeance. It was one of those, and tell me if you remember this, where you could get, what was it, like 10 records for a penny. You'd tape penny to a piece of paper and send it in. And then your only obligation was to buy like 5 records over the next year or something. One of the first times I ever did that, because I think I did that once or twice, I got Judas Priest Screaming for Vengeance, and I got it on a cassette tape. And I played that thing constantly. I loved Screaming for Vengeance, top to bottom, front to back, everything about it I absolutely loved. Well, somebody that I knew at school knew that I loved this Judas Priest album, so he gave me a copy of Unleashed in the East to listen to. Now, Unleashed in the East had come out several years earlier, and I didn't know. You go to the record stores and you'd see all the old stuff. You see these, Judas Priest, these really, you don't realize they'd been around for so long. They had all these other albums. And you'd see the old stuff, but I didn't really dive into it. And of course, but we all knew the song, of course, Breaking the Law and Living After Midnight, which had been in British Steel a couple albums earlier. But we didn't know that stuff in the dark recesses of the Judas Priest history. So he has me listen to Unleashed in the East. And I fell in love with that recording. Now, the song that really jumped out at me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, was the song The Ripper. And that live recording of that song was so amazing. In for surprise, the way he sings, oh my gosh, it was so great. So I used to listen to that in my little Walkman and just loved it. Well, eventually, I thought, I want to hear that song when in the studio. Where is it? Well, so I went and I found this, and this is the one I bought. This is Sad Wings of Destiny. This was actually Judas Priest's second album, and it had the song The Ripper on it. What you didn't realize was that Unleashed in the East, which I loved so much, it had 9 songs on it. 2 of the songs were actually cover songs. And so really on that album, there were only 7 songs that were written by Judas Priest. And 4 of those 7 songs came off of this record. This was their second record. And you didn't realize how significant this album actually was in the history of Judas Priest. I mean, this is when they had this other logo. This is before they developed the logo that we all know. And this is why this was one of those that was kind of in the back dark recesses of the Judas Priest catalog that you didn't know what it was. And then you buy it and you go, oh my gosh, this thing is amazing. And this probably is my favorite Judas Priest album cover. And they had a couple that were real misses. They had some bad album covers, and they had some great album covers. The stuff, Scream for Vengeance, Defenders of the Faith, I mean, those are awesome. But this one was just spectacular. It just captured something amazing. It's also in the day before they were doing the leather and the spikes and the studs and all that other stuff. I mean, you can see KK here has this hat, and it was a different time for Judas Priest. But again, this was spectacular. So going back then and listening to The Ripper in the studio recording, it threw me at first because it's a little slower, it's drier, it has less energy. But weirdly, over the years, I think I've come to prefer this version. There's just some weird, strange, raw energy to the slightly slower. I don't know. I love this. But then the other things like Tyrant, for example, you hear Tyrant on this album and you go, what is that? Because the version that's on Unleashed in the East has so much more energy, and they lose that weird background vocal Tyrant that they do in this, which I thought was maybe a little silly part of the production. But anyway, this was a pivotal album in the history of Judas Priest. Of course, it's their second album. The first one, I don't think the band even ever liked, Rocka Rolla. Then they had several albums after this before they did Unleashed in the East. And then British Steel is when they really took off, and then Point of Entry, which kind of, I don't know. I thought that was kind of a step backwards. And then they Scream for Vengeance, which is my favorite. Okay, so what I have for you today, and it's not very long, but this goes all the way back to 76 when this album was put out. And it's 2 articles. One of them is basically a little interview with Rob Halford after this album came out, just kind of talking about where Judas Priest was. Again, they were not really, really well known. I mean, they weren't much of anything way back then. So we have that one, and it's very short. And then I have another one that's really, really short, but it's a review of Sad Wings of Destiny, and and the person that reviewed it did not like it. So, and it's part of what makes these articles so entertaining for me, because we have all the backstory now. We know where it all ended up and where this all went. And to hear what they were saying, though, what their thoughts were at the time, is so fascinating to me. Okay, so this first article, it's from the Birmingham Evening Mail, March 31st, 1976. And the title of the article is Tough Job Getting to the Top. And here it is. This is the one that's kind of talks a little bit to Rob Halford. Birmingham band Judas Priest is one of a host of second division bands scrambling for promotion. But the race for the top involves backbreaking work schedules. Work is something that Priest members are not afraid of, though, and they have no less than 27 different dates next month on their first British headlining tour. To tie in with the big push, their second album, Sad Wings of Destiny, is released this week, and it takes them away from the, quote, heavy metal music tag, which has been pinned on them. That's so interesting to hear them make that comment. It takes them away from that tag. Because in my estimation, at least at this point in time, in 1976, this was really what heavy metal was at that time. I mean, they represented it. So it's strange to hear that. Then again, this came out. I was a little kid. I had no idea what was going on. Okay. Singer Rob Halford from Walsall explains, quote, "We wanted to widen our appeal a bit, and I don't think there's much room for any new heavy metal bands. What we are playing now is just live dynamic rock music." And to put that in context, and this is really important, when he says there's not any room for new heavy metal bands, there's always room for new, right? But you put it in context of the time and what was happening then. Heavy metal was not something that, I think there were probably people that thought it wasn't even going to go anywhere, that it would go the way of the dinosaur, because it had come in, Black Sabbath had kind of pioneered it, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin, they were all considered, quote, heavy metal bands. And they'd been around for years at this point. Matter of fact, Deep Purple had in some ways kind of come and gone, right? And now you had these new things moving in like punk rock. And so guys like this is old heavy metal, punk is the new thing. And so they're looking at what seemed to be a shrinking audience at that point. And I think that's part of why that he's making a comment like this. And maybe even why they're trying to distance themselves from that title. What we're playing now is just live dynamic rock music. At present, it is a very exciting, rather risky time for the band. Quote, "We're at the stage where clubs are behind us," says Rob. "We have such a lot of equipment, backdrops, and all the rest that we have to play town halls to get a stage big enough," which is kind of hilarious. Just again, thinking about this stuff, because when I saw them on the Defenders of the Faith tour, they were in a 17,000 seat arena. So they came so far. Okay. It's all costing quite a bit of money, but we're confident we shall make it this year, and the gamble will be worth it. Unquote. 2 prestige performances last year have put Judas Priest in the reckoning for the big push. First, there was the Reading Festival, where they were very well received by a huge crowd, and then a major concert with Hawkwind at Bingley Hall, Birmingham. The album does indeed reveal the new approach which Rob described, basically heavy music relieved by quieter melodic material. And partly, I don't know, why do they say things like this? One of the things that was on this album that really became one of their touchstone songs was not just The Ripper, but Victim of Changes, which I haven't seen them lately, but I think that might even still be in their set. Because that song, my gosh, Victim of Changes is such a magnificent song. It's so good. It's so good. But it has some very slow, ponderous moments in it. And melodic. And Rob Halford handles that stuff so well too with his voice. Okay, let's see, melodic material. And the album's best and most instant track, Ripper, is released as a single. And that's the end of the article. Okay, so now here's the really funny one. This is, I'm not going to read you this whole thing. I'll just read you the Judas Priest part. This is from the Daily Breeze, July 30th, 1976, and it's titled "Who's Rockin'? 3 bands make debuts with weak rock LPs." And of course, although it's not a debut, it's Judas Priest's second album. Rocka Rolla, though, I think they were trying to forget it. I'm going to read you the Judas Priest part of the review. Judas Priest, Sad Wings of Destiny, is a Black Sabbath sound-alike. If you're a manic depressive, this band may do wonders for your bummed out state. Why, it may even bum you out some more. While the musicians are competent heavy metalists, the group still becomes bogged down in the trenches of its own unwavering monolithic attack of high-strung power chords and screeching vocals. Cuts like Tyrant and Victim of Changes show some concern for imagination. Not much, just some. Still, if you ever get into the mood to hit the depths of depression with unimaginative heavy metal, Judas Priest affords you that chance. All right, guy clearly didn't care much for it, doesn't like it nearly as much as I do. Anyway, I think Sad Wings of Destiny was still, I think, was so many great songs on it. And even though they didn't have the energy that they did in Unleashed in the East, I still think it's a really, really fantastic album. Anyway, please follow the channel. If you saw them back in these days, I didn't see them until they were, the really, really big. I would love to hear if you ever saw them back in these early days, what that was like. We get so many great comments on this channel. There's so many people that tell these concert stories and these amazing things. I think we're going to make some videos in the near future where we just read some of these stories, because we get these great comments where people share these experiences seeing Led Zeppelin back in the early days and Deep Purple and Black Sabbath and all these people way, way, way back and what it was like. And I'd love to hear, if you saw them back then, what that was like and what your experience also is like with this album, Sad Wings of Destiny. What did you think of this? Did it hit you the same way it hit me, where I was a little confused at first because it was so slow and just sounded so different than Unleashed in the East did? But then over time, I really grew to go, I kind of like what they did here. Anyway, so please like the channel, like the video, follow the channel, and leave your comments. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.